Welcome back to another episode of Chicago Bears Weekly. Yo, what's up, world? Welcome back to the channel. Ep.3 Sports signing in, and this is another episode of Chicago Bears Weekly, and this is Season 9, Episode 3. With the NFL Draft rolling around, it's time to take a little bit of a revisionist history back into some Bears history, and today we're going to talk about the top 5 best draft classes that the Chicago Bears have ever had in the history of their franchise, which spans over 100 years. Yes, it took me a while to do the research for this, but we are going to look at the top 5 draft classes and what made those draft classes stand out for the Chicago Bears in their history. And I'm not going to make this intro longer. So without further ado, let's dive into it. The number 5 draft class is the draft class of 1981. Now, the Bears started off with their first round pick being Keith Van Horn out of USC, a tackle who spent 13 seasons from 1981 to 1993 as a member of the Chicago Bears. He was a stable at tackle for the Chicago Bears. He was consistent on that offensive line. And yes, he was a member of that 1985 famed Bears team, which won the Super Bowl. And during his career, he never made the Pro Bowl or All-Pro, but he was one of those consistent mainstays on a very good Chicago Bears offensive line that produced the Hall of Famer, which we may or may not get into later in this video. But Keith Van Horn was one of those mainstays in the Bears offensive line. He was worth that first round pick. And the second round pick was linebacker out of Baylor, Mike Singletary, who we all know is one of the top 5 middle linebackers to ever play the game. He spent 12 seasons all with the Chicago Bears from 81 to 92. And then on top of that, he was a 10-time Pro Bowler, a 7-time All-Pro, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year in 1985 and in 1988. And he was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame class of 1998. One of the standout middle linebackers. He was one of those guys that brought the intensity. He was what the mantra of the Bears, the Monsters of the Midway, stood for. In the middle of those famed 1980s Bears defenses, he was just the cornerstone of that Bears defense in that era. And like I said, one of the top 5 middle linebackers to ever play this game. Mike Singletary, round 2. Now, round 3, we have Ken Mangrum, a wide receiver out of Stanford. Now, during his time, he was mainly maybe like a third option wide receiver, but he was productive on the Bears with 94 catches, 1,328 yards, during his 6 seasons as a Chicago Bear. And of course, like I said, member of the 85 team. He wasn't one of those big time producing players, but he was still one of the better players in that draft. 1981, round 4, the Bears selected Todd Bell, a defensive back out of the Ohio State University. He did make a Pro Bowl in 84, but Todd Bell is known for one main reason, and that is that he held out because of contract disputes during the famed 1985 Chicago Bears Super Bowl winning season. Spent 6 seasons with the Bears, 84 Pro Bowler. I think things may have been different if he did not hold out of that season. At the end of the day, he was still a productive player for the Bears, selected in the 4th round, so the Bears got some value out of that. And then round 7 was the safety DB Jeff Fisher out of USC, which he wasn't really that good of a player, but he was more known of becoming a coach of the Tennessee Titans and the Los Angeles, then St. Louis at times, Rams, which ended up going to a Super Bowl during the 1999 season with the Tennessee Titans. He was a Lane State coach from 94 to 10 with the Titans, and then a coach from 12 to 16 with the Rams. He was one of those 85 Bears famed players to end up becoming a head coach and end up being something more than just a football player. He was a good head coach in this league, and his tenure spent a very long time. The number 4 draft class on this list is the Bears 1975 draft class. And if most people don't know, it's this guy behind me that was the first round pick, the greatest Bear ever, Walter Jerry Payton Sweetness out of Jackson State University. I don't really have to go through all the things that he meant to the Chicago Bears organization. He was at one point the all-time NFL leading rusher until the record got broke by Emmitt Smith. He rushed for 110 touchdowns, 16,726 yards. He caught for 4,538 yards with 15 more TDs. He was a 1977 League Offensive Player of the Year and League MVP, 9-time Pro Bowler, 5-time first-team All-Pro, 85 Bears Super Bowl champion, and the pillar of what it meant to be the Chicago Bear, a pillar of what it meant for great running back play. Arguably, I personally say he is the greatest running back to ever suit up a pair of cleats. When the Bears drafted him, #1 overall in theirs, #3 overall in total. First round, the Bears they nailed it right on the head with his work ethic. I don't even want to speak too much deeply into Walter Payton. You guys know that Walter Payton was one of the greatest, and he was just the epitome of what it meant to be a Chicago Bear. Tough, hard-nosed, kick your ass, all that type of thing. Walter Payton was it. He was him. Rest in peace to the GOAT. Round 2, the Bears select Mike Hartenstein, defensive end from Penn State. Now, he spent 12 seasons with the Bears from 75 to 86. And one of the things, he was not one of those big names, but he was always a key rotational piece in this Bears defense from his mainstay. He wasn't one of those household names, maybe like a Dent, maybe like a Hampton or something like that. But he was one of those players that was very key. And as far as the rotational pieces of the defensive line, and all defensive line need key rotational pieces. And Mike Hartenstein was a tough, hard-nosed, one of those guys that was a key piece in the rotation of the Bears defensive line in those famed defenses. So the Bears hit the head there. Now, round 6 of that 1975 draft, the Bears select Bob Avellini, quarterback out of Maryland. He was a quarterback, started for like his first 5 or 6 seasons with the Chicago Bears from 75 to 84. He spent 9 total seasons with the Bears, and he was on the 75 to 79. He was a starter, and he was on the starting quarterback of the team that made the playoffs in Walter Payton's MVP year in 1977. I always say you have to have some success at quarterback if you're starting that long. We don't get Jim McMahon if Bob Avellini is not the quarterback. So I'll just say that is you guys take it what you make it. But Bob Avellini, 4 years, he got 25 wins, and he spent his last 4 years as the backup to McMahon or Fuller or whoever was starting at the Bears at that point. He was the backup, 25 wins, which the Bears were not a very good football team during the late 70s, some of those years. So just take it as it may. They did make the playoffs, was the strength of Payton, of course. Round 12 was Doug Plank out of the Ohio State University. He was the namesake of the Bears' 46 defense with Buddy Ryan at the time as the defensive coordinator. He was one of those guys that you guys talk about, one of those safeties that can go in the box, those box safeties. Doug Plank was one of those, and I think the pillar of a box safety, one of those guys that was very physical, can go up and hit and play the linebacker position and play the DB position, was athletic enough to do both. And the way that he played football was the name of that 46 defense. So again, very productive, 15 career picks, and he's played 101 career games with the Chicago Bears. Him along with his safety teammate, Gary Fixick, was a solid safety pairing for the Bears during that era. Now, round 17, I know this will sound crazy to go to round 17, but the Bears select Roland Harper, running back out of Louisiana Tech, and he spent 7 seasons with the Bears to pair with Walter Payton at running back position. And Harper was a very solid running back in his own right. He rushed for close to 1,000 yards in 1978 with 992 rushing yards. He finished his career with 3,044 rushing yards and 15 TDs. He missed the 1979 season due to a knee injury. When he was healthy, him and Walter Payton was a very good pair of running back duo. Now, these are the days in the 70s where teams ran the football a ton. So when you're speaking of a guy of Walter Payton's usage level, and we know Walter Payton was the offense for the Bears for a good amount of time, especially in those late 70s years, to have a guy like Roland Harper, who was very productive in his own right, was a very good pick, especially late in the 17th round for the Chicago Bears. Today's video is brought to you by ExpressVPN. For me, it is very important to have a VPN to protect my online privacy. It'd be very, very creepy if there was someone out there who kept a log of every single thing that you did online. So why let your internet provider really do that to you online. The best thing to do is to get yourself a VPN, and why not go with the ExpressVPN, the best VPN available. Personally, I like it for the fact that you can unlock Netflix shows that you do not get in the US market. Now, one show that I've started to get myself into is Brooklyn Nine-Nine. You search Brooklyn Nine-Nine in the US, doesn't come up. But you can switch your location to Canada, and you can research Brooklyn Nine-Nine again, and bam, it pops up right then and there, and you can catch up on your episodes of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Now, if you click the link in the description below, you will get 3 free months of ExpressVPN. Just by clicking the link below and you sign up today, you will get 3 months free of ExpressVPN. All you have to do is click the link down below and you will get ExpressVPN. Now, let's just get back to the video. Number 3 is the 1936 NFL Draft, and this is the first NFL draft ever in history, and the Bears nailed it with 2 picks. Their first pick was Joe Stoddard of West Virginia, a tackle who was a 4-time Pro Bowler, 4-time All-Pro, 3-time NFL champ. This is before the Super Bowl era. And he was a 1930s All-Decade team member. He spent 36 to 42 and then 45 to 46 with the whole World War II going on. So he was with the military. He had to serve. He came back, played with the Bears, along with Danny Fortman, a guard linebacker out of Colgate, who was also with the Bears for the same amount of time, 36 to 42, and he spent 45, 46 as a Bear. 3-time Pro Bowler, 6-time first-team All-Pro, and he was a member of those 3 NFL championship teams in that era, and both made the Hall of Fame in the same class of 1967. So to nail those 2 picks in the very first ever NFL draft, key pillars of your offensive line, Fortman was a key pillar at defense. And then on top of that, they both spend the same amount of time as the Bears, which is actually kind of weird when I was doing this research. And they both were pillars of those 1940s Bears, which we can call one of the best or one of the beginning NFL dynasties. And they were both All-Pros, Hall of Famers, and that same time, 3-time Pro Bowler for Fortman. And the Bears nailed it during the 1936, the first ever draft. Number 2 is the 1965 Bears draft, which we seen the first 2 picks they nailed, and just nailed it, completely nailed it, with their first pick being Dick Butkus, linebacker out of Illinois, one of the fierce, most ferocious defensive players that the NFL has ever seen, one of the top 5 middle linebackers, along with Urlacher, along with a guy like a Singletary, the famed middle linebacker position for the Bears. He was the beginning of that. You could tell Bill George in there as well, but he was that standard for the Bears at middle linebacker, being an 8-time Pro Bowler, a 5-time team All-Pro, and the 60s and 70s decade team. And if they had a Defensive Player of the Award year of those days, especially the AP Defensive Player of the Year, he would probably have a couple of them. One of the famed defensive, ferocious linebackers that set the tone for this franchise for years to come. And then that second first-round pick was used for Gale, running back out of Kansas, who was a 4-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro, 1965 Rookie of the Year, and he had amassed a total of 21 touchdowns during his rookie 22 touchdowns during his rookie year. And on top of that, he was also named to the 1960s All-Decade team. So you're talking about nailing it with your 2 picks in the first round in that draft to be elected to the Hall of Fame in 1979 as a Dick Butkus, and being elected to the Hall of Fame in 1977 with Gale Sayers. So when we're talking about the first 2 picks of that draft, the Bears absolutely nailed it with getting 2 of the cornerstones of your franchise on each side of the ball. Now, the Bears didn't do a ton of winning during that time. They didn't win, go to the Super Bowl or anything like that, but because of the injuries to both Butkus and Sayers, which has them had shorter careers. But we're talking about both players, special players, and the Bears nailed it with those 2 picks in 65. And then the 7th round pick turned out to be a good player with Dick Gordon, wide receiver out of Michigan State, who spent 7 seasons with the Bears from 65 to 71. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler and a 1-time team All-Pro in 1970. He was one of those receivers that, yeah, he did not have a strong Bears career, but he was very successful. You get a 7th round pick and he becomes a Pro Bowler. He becomes two-time Pro Bowler, All-Pro. You're getting a good value out of that pick. And what elevated this 65 draft was, of course, the Butkus and the Sayers pick. But Dick Gordon was a very good player for the Bears back in those days where we started to see the Bears start to struggle a bit. And those were key players on those teams. And they nailed it 65. Now, the best draft the Bears have ever had will be the 1983 draft, which I did a full video about in previous seasons of Chicago Bears Weekly. So you can go back and go deeper into that. I go deeper into this class then. But their first round pick was Jimbo Covert, tackle out of Pittsburgh, who became a Hall of Famer, two-time Pro Bowler, two-time first-team All-Pro. He was one of those left tackles that, this is in the same stat. You guys know Lawrence Taylor, one of the most ferocious and one of the best defensive players to ever play the game in the NFL. Well, guess how many sacks that Jimbo Covert let up to Lawrence Taylor? 0. For you to have a tackle like that, and the Bears played the Giants a good amount of time in this era for them to be non-divisional opponents. They played them in the playoffs. They played them in a raid to Giants Super Bowls or the Bears Super Bowl 85. They played them a good amount. And for you to not let up a single sack to a guy who was that ferocious, that tells you about the talent that the Bears had at that left tackle position in those 80s offensive line. And Jimbo Covert was that. And then they had another first-round pick that was used to take Willie Galt, wide receiver out of Tennessee, who was a very good deep front, 5 seasons with the Bears from 83 to 87. He caught 3,650 yards, 27 TDs, and a kick return TD. He was a deep threat for that offense that had the running game going. And Willie Galt had that tremendous track speed that can go deep and get the football. And the Bears utilized that speed, and he was one of those deep threats that just got the football deep and made a ton of plays on special teams and as well as on offense for those 80s Bears. Now, round 2, you got another solid player, Mike Richardson, a defensive back at Arizona State. He spent 6 seasons with the Bears from 83 to 88. And then on top of that, he had 20 career interceptions, a pick 6 in the 1985 season. He was one of those cover corners where the Bears blitzed a lot, and they trusted him on the island with that 46 defense. And he played well. We're not going to get into the after-career things. You guys can Google that. I'm not going to talk about that stuff he done post-NFL career. But during his career, he was one of those corners that you can leave on the island, and you can trust that you can leave that guy on the island and he will make plays. And that was what Mike Richardson was to this 46 1985 era of Bears defense. Now, another guy that they got in the 3rd round was Dave Durison, defensive back out of Notre Dame. I referenced this earlier in the video because if it was not for Todd Bell holding out, we don't see what Dave Durison becomes. And Dave Durison becomes a 4-time Pro Bowler from 85 to 88, 18 interceptions, 7 sacks in 1986, and he was a second-team All-Pro. He was one of those guys that he was ferocious, hard-hitting. We really got to see his playmaking with the Todd Bell holdout, and he was one of those safeties that was like a Doug Plank, like a box type of safety that he can play up in the box, make a couple of blitzes. He can go back in coverage, get some interceptions, make some plays there. It was a big key to Buddy Ryan and those famed 80 Bears defenses. Now, 4th round, the Bears select Tom Thayer, guard out of Notre Dame. He was a mainstay on the Bears offensive line through all his 8 seasons from 85 to 92 on the Chicago Bears offensive line. He was interior guard who was the Blues Brothers, famed Blues Brothers Bears offensive line. That was very physical, very tough up front. And he's also a Chicago native, i.e. the Butkus as well. Then on top of that, the guys can still hear him now as he's the Bears radio announcer as we speak right now for the Bears. So Tom Thayer, one of the better picks of this draft. Then on top of Tom Thayer, you get another mainstay of the Bears offensive line when they drafted Mark Bortz out of Iowa, a guard who spent 12 seasons at the Bears. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler, and he was, like Thayer, the glue to the interior of this Bears offensive line. When you had Hilgenberg at center, you had Thayer, and then you had Bortz, you had Van Horn, you had Covert, a very good Chicago Bears Blues Brothers offensive line that was all drafted outside of Hilgenberg within these top 5 draft classes. And for Bortz and Thayer to be mainstays and keys is why this 83 draft is the best. And I haven't even gotten to probably the best player in this draft, which was selected round 8, which was Richard Dent, defensive end out of Tennessee State, who spent 12 seasons as a Bear from 83 to 93. Then from 95, he was a 2011 Hall of Famer, 4-time Pro Bowler, a 1-time All-Pro. He was the MVP of that Super Bowl 20. Then on top of that, he is the franchise leader in sacks with 124.5 career sacks, and his record for sacks in the season just got broken in 2021 by Robert Quinn. But Richard Dent, to get a guy in the 8th round out of Tennessee State, not one of the big schools, especially then, it was not one of those big schools. And for the Bears to get that guy in round 8, he can get out to the quarterback. He's very ferocious, mainstay of those famed blitz-heavy 46 defenses. He was a very, very good football player, great football player that the Bears got in round 8, and that was make this the best of these draft classes. But that's going to do it for this episode of Chicago Bears Weekly. Looked at the top 5 drafts of Chicago Bears history. Make sure you guys leave this video a like, comment your thoughts, share, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel as that continues to help this channel to grow. But I'm APW Sports. Make sure you guys have a great next day, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.